A good day to all of you and welcome to the show Living Multiculturalism with Mayank Bhatt. You are watching TAG TV. The program is brought to you by the Canadian Thinkers Forum. Friends, today we have with us a young writer who has written an extremely bold novel a couple of years ago, Safia Fazlul. She is originally from Bangladesh but has not been there for practically her entire life. She has lived a bit in Norway and has been in Toronto for many years now. Welcome to the show, Safia.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's begin by talking about what your experience has been as a writer in Canada.
My experience has been quite good. I understand that I've been luckier than most because I wrote the novel and 9 months down the line it was getting published. And I know that the theme and the subject of the book was quite, as you like to say, bold. So I was actually quite surprised that very shortly it got published, and I'm sure maybe in other countries it wouldn't be as quickly or as easily published. So it's been good.
Let's talk about your novel. What is the novel?
My novel is The Harem, and it's about a young girl who's Bangladeshi, and she is from a Muslim family, and she wants to break away from her family is very, very conservative, traditional. And she's in Canada and she wants to be more Canadian and she wants a more liberal lifestyle. And she doesn't know how to get away from that because, of course, to move away from that, you need money. So she starts her own escort agency, selling women. And she learns that, freedom has many different meanings. And being in a Muslim household doesn't necessarily mean that you're oppressed. There's other types of oppression that she finds is in the West as well. Yeah.
I've read the book, I've read the novel, and I found there were passages in the novel which were clearly aimed at shocking the reader, at least a reader of probably my generation and with my background. I come from a South Asian society. I've lived most of my life in South Asia. So were you deliberately trying to do anything there?
The audience that I was seeking was actually, I look at my novel as a cautionary tale, especially for younger girls who kind of like similar to my background, who think that they have to be a certain way and kind of forget their past and forget their ethnicity just to fit in. And it was a caution tale for them. And I mean, how do you shock youth these days? You have to use like words that you normally wouldn't use. I did not deliberately mean to shock maybe the older generation, but if they were shocked, I mean, it wasn't meant to be in a hostile way or anything like that. But as long as it made them think, that's what matters.
And do you think you succeeded in doing that?
I hope so. What you tell me? Did it make you think, or were you just offended by it?
No. I wasn't offended in the sense of being offended, but I certainly did feel that at a certain level, at a certain point, the novel is getting into areas which makes the reader extremely uncomfortable because of the graphic details that are being provided there.
Yeah.
And I thought that this was very deliberate.
Well, I don't believe in censorship, and everything I wrote there, I mean, the book is fictional, but many parts of it are true. And I'm assuming the graphic details you're talking about, I know what they are, and they're probably true. They do happen. I mean, I'm not going to cover up the truth just because some people might be offended by it, right? So I mean, I don't really feel, I don't regret it.
Let's talk a bit about your background. You say that you belong to a Muslim, quote unquote, Muslim family, and you have that sort of upbringing, I would imagine.
Yes.
So let's talk about that, because I think it has some bearing on what you have created in the novel.
Yes. Well, growing up, my parents are Bangladeshi, and they've never been overly religious, but I feel like in the Bangladeshi community, you have like the talons of Islam in there, and you have certain things you do and certain things you don't do. And it doesn't really matter if it's in the Quran or not. It doesn't really matter if the Imam says you should be doing this. It's just been there. It's become a tradition. And I would say my parents are more traditionalist than Islamic. And I find that there's a bigger problem in that, because, I mean, Islam and the Quran, I mean, there's so many there's so many interpretations you can make. And it's a very forgiving religion, if you ask me. It's very forgiving. I mean, you're not supposed to live your life according to someone else in the Quran. At least that's not what the Quran preaches. But my parents preach something else. You live your life the way we tell you to live it. So growing up was just I felt very like I didn't really belong in the larger community. because first I went to Oslo, Norway, then I went to Toronto, Canada, and I'm still in Toronto, Canada, but it's just, you come home at this time, you wear these clothes, you behave the way we tell you to behave. And it didn't have a lot of Muslim colors to it. It was more like their way or the highway, kind of. And their way was the Bangladeshi way, what they learned at home, the traditional ways they've learned back home.
But this would be true for any South Asian society, whether it is Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka.
Absolutely. And when I wrote the book, I had all these people, contact me via Facebook and my website. And these were girls from like Iran and Afghanistan and even India. And they're like, oh, I loved your book. I can totally relate. And that was actually real nice. It wasn't just Muslim girls. It was a lot of girls from that part of the world. Yeah. And even guys as well, surprisingly.
So you were saying that your book is a certain reaction to a very rigid way of bringing up children.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, yeah. My book, nowhere do I go against Islam in it. I know that, I read some reviews and some people have said that, it's very much going against what Islam is really about, and that's not what the book is about at all. It's more about strict upbringing and not understanding your children's needs. When the immigrant experience, you move away from a country, you move into a new environment, but you don't want to let your children flourish in this environment. You don't want them to fit in it, right? So it's more about that than religion, for sure. I guess like you can take Russian immigrants and give them this book, and they might even be able to relate.
Would it be right to say that this is sort of a rebellion against a culture that you do not want to or did not feel part of?
That's a really good question, and I don't think at all it's a rebellion. Well, what the character does in the book, she tries to rebel, but what she realizes is that there's nothing to rebel against, because just because you have two different cultures, it doesn't mean that one's more superior to the other. So I won't tell how the plot goes, but it's not rebelling against a culture that I didn't feel like I belong in. No.
Do you feel that you belong to that culture?
To be honest, no, I don't.
So where do you belong then? This is very relevant to my show, because we talk of multiculturalism all the time, but multiculturalism assumes that you feel at home in multiple cultures.
Yeah.
It does not necessarily mean that you're rejecting something that was part of your being earlier and you're adapting something that is new. What does it mean to you?
I think multiculturalism, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I think it's really just a buzzword that the government uses. I don't feel like I'm stuck to any culture. I really feel like, what they say, citizen of the world, kind of. And there are certain parts of Bengali culture I love, South Asian culture. There's certain parts of Canadian culture that I love. What is multiculturalism? Do you have all these types of cultures like living side to side and not mingling, or does it mean they're mingling? Like, what does it mean? Really, what is it? How would you?
I would rather that you answer that.
I think it's a buzzword for the government. I think it's a way to say, well, come here, work here, we'll give you jobs. You'll get along with everyone. But do we get along? Do we really get along? It's quiet out there, but when we go home, do we talk about oh, this South Asian cab driver did this to me today. Oh, don't go over there. There's too many Chinese people. I'm sure a lot of us do it. I hear it from friends. It's the multiculturalism out there, but at home, is that what we're really thinking?
One of the things that I have felt about writers of your generation or people of your generation is that you don't actually accept the culture that you come from, or at least your parents come from, because you find it very restrictive. On the other hand, you are not willing to accept Canadian culture, or quote unquote Canadian culture, because it does not accept you. So you're in a state of limbo of not belonging either there or here.
I think for me, as a Muslim who's not wearing Islam on the face, as in I don't wear a hijab, and I think I dress very Canadian, if you want to call it that. I think for me, I haven't had that much trouble integrating. But and the thing is, because I started sociology, I started history, and I know that a lot of South Asians, we had to leave, because of financial reasons and stuff like that. So I try to be more Bengali. I try to actively be more Bengali, but I have no idea how to do that. I don't reject Bengali culture at all. I actually want to be more of a South Asian culture. I'm actually trying to learn Urdu and Hindi right now, but it's not about being rejected. It's just, how do I do that? How do I get into something that I'm not living in, right? So I mean, I think your perception of the youth doesn't really apply to me at all. I want to be more South Asian.
Okay, and how does one go about becoming more South Asian in a society, especially with your sort of background? And there will be several people with your background. They were kind of uprooted for reasons you did not choose to be out of South Asia.
Yep.
It was a decision made for you.
Yep.
You don't exactly belong, and you want to belong.
Yeah.
So how do you achieve that?
That's what I'm trying to find out. I mean, every time me and my parents have a fight, oh, why are you coming home late? I'll be like, well, I didn't choose to come here. You're the one, I didn't choose to be born. You sent me away to Oslo when I was 6 months, and you brought me here. So, I mean, I'm trying to find out. I mean, how can I have that balance where, when I have children, I don't have children, but when I do, how can I tell them, well, this is your background. This is where your grandparents came from. This is where all your history comes from. I don't know. It's a challenge.
You wrote a very fascinating piece in a recent collection on Islamic identity in Canada and the relevance of Islamic identity in Canada.
Yeah.
And you talk about your experiences both in Norway and in Canada. I want you to talk about what it meant for you to live in Norway, and how different is that society from what you experience here in Canada.
Well, when you compare Norway to Canada, I mean, I think you could say the multiculturalism succeeded here, because in Norway it's not like you're not really allowed to practice what you want to practice. I remember, like I wrote in my article, like growing up, I was in elementary school, and if it's Christmas time, you have to celebrate Christmas. You can't go like, well, I'm Muslim, I can't. No, you have to do it. You have to have the Christmas cards. Easter time, you got to paint the eggs. They're not very open-minded. Maybe things have changed now. I was there a while ago, but Norway wasn't a good experience for me at all. I think I was the only South Asian kid in my school, me and my sister, and we were bullied. We're called the P word on a daily basis. So Norway is something I would like to forget.
And how has it been here?
I have never had overt racism happen to me here. Never, not even once. But I mean, covert, probably. I think, maybe it hasn't happened to me personally, but I've heard stories where, where sometimes your name makes a difference whether you get a job or not. Someone who has a more English sounding name gets the job, and because you might not have it, you won't, be an applicant just because of that.
How has that affected your creativity?
It makes
Let me elaborate. Does it mean that you choose to write on subjects that have, implicit connection to dealing with racism, dealing with prejudice, dealing with xenophobia, or is it something that inspires you to write more about something that you would otherwise ignore?
No, I think I'm way more interested in writing about sociological issues, racism, stuff like that, because to me that's important, I mean, I like reading a fantasy book, of course, who doesn't, to escape, but I'm really, like you said, it has affected me. My story has affected me to the point where I would like to write stories and novels about, experiencing these kinds of discriminations. That's much more important to me than writing about things that I would usually ignore. Yeah.
Are you working on a novel right now?
I am, yeah, and it's taking a very long time just because it's a very, very hard novel. It's even more, like you said, how the Harem was really bold. This one's even bolder. And some parts are just really hard to write. That's why it's taking so long.
Are you, this may not be a fair question, but I still want to ask you, are you stereotyping yourself in terms of writing a certain kind of novels?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I actually get a little bit angry when I read a lot of reviews about the Harem when they came out. And they kept saying, South Asian writer, Bangladeshi writer, and I'm like, I'm just a writer, I mean, I'm sure, like, white Canadians don't wake up in the morning and say, well, I'm an Irish doctor. Like, you don't do that. I'm just a writer. I don't pigeonhole myself at all. And I really hope that, when the second novel comes out, I hope that they stop calling me Bangladeshi writer. I've been a citizen here for a very long time, so.
What is worse, to be called a Bangladeshi writer or to be called a Muslim writer?
Oh, Muslim writer, for sure. Like, what on earth is a Muslim writer? It sounds so weird, doesn't it? You never ever heard the term Christian writer, have you? I'm sure you have never heard that.
No.
Yeah, Muslim writer is definitely worse than South Asian writer.
Do you have any connections to the Bangladeshi Society today?
I have Bangladeshi friends, but no, I'm not actively involved in the community. No, I think that my views might be a bit too different for the majority, so I stay away. Yeah.
Well, explain that.
I think I don't think my views mesh too well with the majority of Bangladeshi Canadians in Toronto today. So I don't know. I mean, you don't want to go where you're going to be rejected, of course, right? So to stay away.
And are you in touch with Bangladesh per se? Do you have family there? Do you kind of observe the society as it is shaping?
I try to. I do. Most of my family is there. Only my parents are here. I've been dying to go back to Bangladesh. Like I've been there twice, and I loved it. And I've been wanting to go back, but every time I want to go, my mom's like, election year, flood, you can't go. There's always something where they're like, I mean, let's face it, it has more dangers than here. So, I mean, as much as I would love to go there every year and visit, it's not, safety is an issue there. But I do have the wish of becoming more involved with Bangladesh for sure.
How would that be? What would you do?
Well, my long-term goals has always been, start like a school for young girls there. Because the one time I was there, I mean, I see these girls and they're 15, 16, and they're married off at that age, and they're not doing bad in school, they're doing well. And sometimes they can't even go to school because they can't afford, the uniform they need. It's just very heartbreaking. And my goal, if I could, I would definitely do that. If I had the means, just go back home and start school for girls. Marriage is a great thing, of course, not knocking on marriage, but I feel like you should have the choice to continue your education if you want to, right? And that's a big problem there, I think.
In recent years, a lot of bloggers with secular values have been hacked to death in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Do you have any reaction to that kind of development? I ask this question because Bangladesh is one of the South Asian societies with tremendous amount of cultural capital, which you do not find necessarily in other societies.
I'm extremely concerned with that because Bangladesh is a country that, it became independent because of all these, it was secular values, it was about, like you said, cultural capital. That's what, it became what it is because of that. And in recent years, it's changing. It's changing. Bloggers are being hacked. And I heard since September of last year, there's been 45 terrorist attacks. And it's concerning to me, but I'm just as concerned about that as the rest of the world as well. This whole jihadist movement, or whatever you want to call it, right? It is very concerning.
As a young, and I don't like to describe a writer by their ethnic or religious identities, but would you identify yourself as a young Muslim?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I'm definitely a young Muslim, yeah.
And then, so how would you react to what's happening across the world and the changing perception of Islam because of, because it is being associated with certain kind of values?
I think people should educate themselves. I mean, Islam is in no way a new religion. It's been here for years and years and years, and all you gotta do is go on Wikipedia and actually read about Islam before you judge it, and you'll understand that these people with this extremist, they come from extremists are in every single religion. It's not just Islam. So I think people should just educate themselves before they judge.
If you were to put out Harem to a certain kind of readers who follow Islam, they would not be very happy.
No.
So do you realize the dichotomy of your existence here, the duality of your personality here? On the one hand, you believe in what your religion stands for, but on the other hand, most practitioners of that religion would not agree with what you have done in terms of creativity.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I interpret the Quran in a certain way, and other Muslims interpret in a certain way. And the Quran that I've read, and nowhere does it say you can't express yourself creatively. Nowhere does it say you can't write about things that matter, things that are affecting the real world today. So, I mean, me writing about this stuff has nothing to do with me being a Muslim or not. I mean, if you don't like what I write, and if someone's an extremist, of course, they're going to take the book and probably slap it back on my face and be like, this is not Islamic. But in my opinion, from my point of view, they're wrong. Because nowhere in the Quran does it say you can't do this. You can't write about, sociological issues that are out there. I mean, nothing in my book is so fictional that doesn't make sense. Everything in it happens in real life.
What sort of influences have shaped your personality as a writer, in terms of either different writers or different kind of cultures? I don't know. I leave that interpretation to you.
I would say the one book that kind of opened up my eyes was A Clockwork Orange. I read it when I was very young, 13, 14. And I remember this, there was a quote from there. He said, "I do what I do because I like what I do," along those lines. And I just realized at that moment, like, you know what, my parents don't own me. I realized my parents don't own me. And in Clockwork Orange, you know, the main character, Alex, was that his name?
Yes.
Alex, they try to shape his mind. And I find that that's what my parents have been doing. Not my parents, but, you know, the community. They try to shape my mind to something. And I've asked myself, is it better to be someone I'm not and let someone else have control over who I am, or just be myself? So I would say that novel just really, really, it even inspired the Harem, you know, the way she kind of talks. She's very, you know, rough around the edges. She swears whenever she wants to do it. It was very much inspired from that novel, for sure.
Have you read anything else by Anthony Burgess?
A long time ago, yeah. I was actually on a what do you call it? I was reading all this stuff. At that moment in my life, I was reading all this stuff. But that was way back in the day. I don't really remember, yeah.
And so you know, at once you open up a different vista of your personality. Going forward, do you think that what motivated you to create the characters and the novel would still be relevant to you as you grow older? Because I would imagine that the point of reference in terms of having to shape your own identity would have been to a great extent achieved by then.
Mm-hmm.
So you would be your own person, maybe, you know, by the time your second novel is ready to be published.
Yeah.
So would the motivations change then, and how, if they do?
Are you asking if those characters will still inspire me? Is that what you're asking?
Your situation has changed,
Yeah.
right? So what was initially an act of rebellion,
Mm-hmm.
although you don't choose to call it that,
Yeah.
may not be relevant by the time you are a mature person and you're writing more.
Mm-hmm.
So what will then be the inspiration?
Yeah, I tend to draw inspiration from the moment that I'm, you know, the chapter in my life that I'm in. So this second novel, it has nothing to do with rebellion, really. It has more to do with, you know, well, I don't want to tell you what it's about because I'm really excited about the idea. But yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with rebellion, and it's not a theme I'm going to keep going back to. You know, the Harem was something I wrote it when I was 16. Actually, the first draft I wrote it when I was 16, and I wrote it within a couple of months actually, because it just like came from the heart. Like, and it was even more gruesome. The words were even stronger because it was very much an emotional novel. And the one I'm working on right now, I'm trying to step a bit away from emotion so I can get my point across a bit better. But rebellion it's not going to be the main theme in my other novels. It was very exclusive to the Harem. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move back a bit to working as a writer in Canada. You know, what are the influences that has shaped you as a writer working in this society?
You're asking like what influences me with my writing?
Yeah.
I'm a people watcher. I observe, I meet characters, and I like characters who are different from the others. Like, the crazier a person is, the more likely I am to befriend them. And that's my inspiration. And in Toronto, I mean, you have every character in Toronto. You have people from all walks of life. You know, as much as I complain about Toronto, I tend to do that a lot. For a writer, this is the best place to be, I think. And I draw my inspiration from people in my life and their situations. And also, I mean, the second novel that's coming it has some of it is from my own personal life as well. Not all, but some.
And do you have a publisher for that already?
No, it's not even done yet.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a very slow process because it's a novel that's really difficult to write. Just because there's some situations that I think I tend to be a very sensitive person, and writing about these things is difficult for me. So I'm just taking my time with it, working on it little by little. Yeah.
So thank you, Safia, for being with us today. I hope that your career as a novelist shapes up to the best possible manner and the best possible fashion.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayank, and thank you for having me. It was nice talking to you.
So friends, we were watching Safia Fazlul, a young novelist who is based in Canada for many years with Bangladeshi heritage. Friends, I always end the show with a request. Write to us. We want to feature writers who you want to watch and interact with. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much and see you next time. You are watching Living Multiculturalism with Mayank Bhatt on TAG TV. The program was brought to you by the Canadian Thinkers Forum. Have a good day.
#1 multicultural channel. This is TAG TV.